Now, the last one of Hitler's abilities is basically his skillfulness at making deals with politicians. Now, Hitler was an excellent political strategist, and I think you'll find that this draws parallels to Joseph Stalin. To be a great dictator, it was also hugely dependent on your ability to manipulate others. To be very opportunistic, to know when was the good time to strike, when was the good time to make use of the opportunities available, and to utilize them to your own advantage. And Hitler was brilliant at that. So Hitler was willing to wait for the right time to take power gradually. He was skillful at making deals to advance his own position. And the best example that you can use or understand is that he was willing to bide his time, understanding that people like President Hindenburg were still around, and it would do him no good to get into direct confrontation with these leaders. So what Hitler did was, through his charisma, through his reorganization of the Nazi Party, through his introduction of Nazi ideology, through exploiting the communist fears, he made himself hugely popular with German society. He made himself hugely seen as a very important member of German society that people could depend on, that people wanted to lead. And this made him hugely invaluable to any organization that was unpopular with the masses. And you don't have to look no further than to look at the Weimar Republic. Now remember in our earlier parts of the lesson that the Weimar Republic was especially weak because of its proportional representation, its coalition governments, and its ineffectiveness at making decisions. And the German society and German people were actually agitated by what the Weimar government clearly could not do. And this was made worse, of course, by the economic circumstances of that time. So Adolf Hitler then became seen as a rising star, as someone who, could bring solutions basically to the government or to German society. And this is how Hitler made himself invaluable. Hitler became to be seen as a very useful person to have in governance in order for you to placate others. So the existing president, which was President Hindenburg, who was leading the Weimar Republic, so thought that in 1933 it would be a great moment to make use of Adolf Hitler by inviting Hitler to be the chancellor. By chancellor, it's almost the equivalent of a prime minister. Uh, to with the whole understanding that President Hindenburg and Chancellor Franz von Papen had was that they could hopefully control Adolf Hitler better by including him inside the Reichstag, and over time maybe uh, sway him over to their side, such that he became a loyal member of the Reichstag himself and became a useful member of the Weimar Republic. And at the same time, because Hitler was such a huge popular figure with German society, hopefully it would also change people's views of what Hitler really was, or what the Weimar Republic was. So to help you guys to understand this, President Hindenburg thought that this was the best way forward for Germany, for the Weimar Republic to continue forward, was to bring in Adolf Hitler into governance and hopefully work together, sway him over to the other side, and allow the Weimar Republic to regain its authority. But of course, this played into the hands of Adolf Hitler because Adolf Hitler was not a pawn to be played with. In fact, I would argue, and many historians would argue, that this was a strategic move that Hitler was willing to take. He needed one foot into governance, and not just any position, but he needed to be invited into power, into a very prominent position like the Chancellor. And once he had that, he would have the ability to make necessary changes in government in the Weimar Republic to ensure or to consolidate his power. And we're going to learn about this in the subsequent chapters when we talk about the impact of Hitler's rules. By becoming the Chancellor, this would mean that Adolf Hitler would make certain changes in government that would basically push him and the Nazi Party to become the sole uh, parties that would have the best chance basically to lead Germany forward. So so who voted for Hitler? You'll find that by and large, a large segment of society, on almost every level of society, was in favor of Hitler's or the Nazi Party's ruling. The working class felt that the Nazi Party could solve the problems of unemployment and give the workers more rights. The middle class felt that the Nazi Party and Adolf Hitler could restore law and order in the streets and get rid of the communists, who wanted increased taxes. The upper class saw the Nazi Party as a way to get revenge on the Treaty of Versailles and to rebuild Germany again. The wealthy industrialists saw this as a way to again prevent the communist threat and the rise of powerful trade unions. And women uh, were actually supportive because the Nazi Party promised or emphasized family life and, of course, children's welfare through the youth programs like the Hitler's Youth. So this will give you a good understanding of basically how popular the Nazi Party eventually became. So on this chart here, what you see are all the different political parties that were existing around in the 1920s to 1930s. And these are all the individual general elections that were held. So in the elections is when the German citizens actually go to the Reichstag to vote. And remember that in proportional representation, the more votes you have equals to the more seats you have in parliament, or in the Reichstag, sorry. So you notice that the out of the parties here, the parties that were most popular, all right, actually tends to be the Communist Party, right? Look at its increasing count. In 1920, it had 4% of the Reichstag votes, and increasingly over the years, increased from 62 to 45 to 54 to 77 to 89 to by 1932, 100 seats, together, of course, with the SDP, the Social Democrats. But I think most importantly, what you see is that the Nazi Party went from 32 to dropping to 14 to 12, and then suddenly jumping to 107 to 230, right? And this is at this juncture here that you are talking about basically what Adolf Hitler was doing uh, through his speeches, through his reorganization Nazi Party, through everything that we covered in this chapter. To the point that by it comes to the March 1933 elections, the Nazi Party, right, was essentially the outstanding party with the greatest number of votes.